Welcome to this webinar about build distribution. We're going to set the scene a little bit, talking about distribution, why it matters, and the sort of runway view of build distribution. And then we're going to take a look at Build Distro, which is the runway platform for build distribution. Quick intro. Some of you might know who I am already. I'm Gabe. I'm Runway's CEO, one of our co-founders. I am a former iOS engineer, so just about my whole career until now was building apps and releasing them. Have run my fair share of mobile releases, and that's really what led me and the Runway team to build Runway, experiencing some of the pain points and challenges with mobile releases and the surrounding cast of characters and processes. And so that's what led us all here, wondering if there was a better way to do things. So we're here today to talk about build distribution, why it matters, and also share, of course, what we've built to try to tackle some of the pain points around it. We approach build distribution from the sort of 30,000 foot view. It has very much to do with releases. So Runway as a mobile release management platform is a broad platform. It touches many parts of the process. And we believe strongly that there is a lot that's broken in how mobile releases are run and organized. And that trickles down to many different parts of the process, the end-to-end process. What's broken? Context switching, fires to put out, and a lot of comms on Slack. So you're probably familiar with the back and forth that happens, certainly around releases and around release time, but pretty continuously if your team is shipping regularly. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of different stakeholders. There's a lot of different tools involved that you need to context switch between, one of which might be a build distribution solution. And there are always issues that crop up. And that process of triaging, pulling in the right folks, understanding what went wrong, perhaps in what build, what work, and contributors were involved there, is quite an undertaking, especially for teams at scale. Releases are only as good as the process that leads into them. And so when we talk about releases, it's much more than just clicking buttons to get a submission in or a release in App Store Connect or Play Console. It stretches all the way back to the work that's being prepared for a given release. So the code that's being written, those early builds, work in progress builds that are being validated, integration builds as work approaches the sort of shared integration branch. And of course, RCs, validation, QA, quality and testing on more of the finished product, leading into, of course, that part where you get to upload and ship through the stores. So thinking about releases and building a solution for releases, it has to be something holistic and broad and really touching all parts of the process. Because of that, we're here talking about build distribution. We decided as a team to tackle this particular part of the process ourselves. If you're familiar with Runway, we have a lot of integrations, but we felt that the build distribution piece was a good one to bite off and actually tackle ourselves. It is critical. It's your only chance to actually get some version of a finished product, to compile the build together that includes what you're building and get that into people's hands before it's in the hands of a wider audience. So it's a really important part of the overall release lifecycle. Why does it matter? Let's go into a little more detail. If you do build distribution well, there's a lot of benefits to gain. Some are more sort of tangible or concrete. It lets you catch and fix bugs earlier. Some of you may have heard of this sort of philosophy of shift left. So instead of shipping things and finding out about issues in prod and having to work to hotfix or deal with them after the fact, doing build distribution well means getting more builds into the hands of more folks on your team earlier. And that leads to more bugs and issues caught earlier in the process. That has huge benefits. More importantly, because a lot of people talk about testing a lot, I think, and bugs and catching bugs. perhaps more importantly, the idea that you can actually put your user experience to the test, so actually test the product and the sort of experience for the end user, that's something that needs humans on builds for. You need folks on your team to poke around a build and see actually how things are working from a product perspective. And this is a super, super valuable way to do that. It can start as early as those sort of work in progress builds that engineers might be pushing up for their PMs or QA to check out other engineers. And it also has to do with the sort of alpha beta stages that you might look to set up. So dog fooding, if your company can do that, great way to actually see how the app is performing, again, from that product lens before you need to ship it to end users. Collaboration around build distribution is huge, and you can improve collaboration through good build distribution practices. There's a lot of back and forth between these disciplines, engineering, product, QA. Often the sort of the currency, the back and forth is a build. You're writing some code, you're packaging it up, putting it into a format that product can check out to check, requirements against QA can check it out to test the build and check quality. And so good build distribution really eases that collaboration between disciplines throughout the release cycle. By contrast, doing build distribution poorly can have some pretty impactful implications for an org. Some are kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about. Of course, if you're not catching bugs early, that means you're catching them in production. And that means unhappy users and an unhappy business. Obviously, the impact to revenue once things are in prod and getting discovered there, revenue, usage, key, user behavior is impacted by bugs that are not found until production. So that's one of the downsides. The other one, which is also a little more subtle and important, bugs are inevitable. Bugs in production are inevitable, no matter how good you are at distribution. But fixing things when you do find them takes way more time and resources when you have to do it post-release. So there's some studies out there that have these sort of 100x numbers. The impact to your team of needing to fix after versus before can vary greatly or be very different. So thinking about the impact to your team of when you need to fix things, understanding that some bugs are inevitable. So that's the shift left idea. And finally, sort of the collaboration, the flip side of that coin, silos, frustrated stakeholders. When build distribution doesn't work well, folks quickly get frustrated. It's hard to get people to care about the kinds of testing and internal sort of distribution that you might be wanting to do. And then folks tend to just stick to themselves. You might have fewer builds looked at, and there are many negative ramifications there where you're not actually getting stuff into people's hands to check out. What are some of the specific challenges that we have seen in distribution on our teams before? Some of the things with existing tooling that we noticed that we wanted to correct or improve upon with Build Distro. A super common one that we've noticed is how builds are grouped and sort of structured. Very often, in a lot of the tools teams are using, you end up with a big long list of different build flavors. So again, thinking all the way back to the work in progress builds, if you are sort of distributing those through to nightlies, through to RCs, they're all in one long list. They're all in one place. You see this problem in test flight. You see this problem in App Center, excuse me. How are folks meant to pick through that list of builds, find the right build to test, make sure they're not shipping the wrong build further in your process? There's a lot of challenges that come with how you separate out flavors of builds. This is different than user grouping. So there's a lot of focus, I think, spent on different user groups and access to builds. But it fails to recognize also that there's a sort of lower level logical grouping of builds, different kinds of builds that needs to be taken into account. Context is very important. This idea, again, of this currency that's being passed around the team, builds, the sort of handle that's often used for builds is just a build number. That's really hard to deal with, especially for folks that are sort of further from the process, maybe less technical. If you need to point someone to a build and you just give them a build number and they go looking for it, they're going to be lacking a lot of context about, what the build contains and that kind of thing. Tooling, when it's unapproachable, we talked about this earlier. Clunky install flows or installation flows, a big culprit here. That simply means people are going to get fed up and not want to frequently grab builds to test. And that's the opposite of what we're trying to do here. You want to sort of make build distribution easy, fun if possible, and get a lot of different people on the team grabbing builds throughout the end-to-end process to test and check out and give feedback on. So when your tooling is not approachable and when it's not a smooth experience, people are just going to stay away. And finally, another sort of thing to call out, the bus factor that exists when a lot of build distribution tooling is shoved into CI or scripting. So what we've learned recently is a lot of teams have built out integrations and in-house tooling around some build distribution platforms to get things working how they want. That creates this bus factor and this sort of difficulty where you need subject matter experts to, perform maintenance and upkeep on these systems. One more complication, maybe the reason why a lot of folks are here, App Center is being retired. This is Microsoft's tool that evolved out of Hockey App, a beloved distribution tool that is being sunsetted next year. A lot of teams at scale are using this. A lot of teams, like I mentioned, actually have told us they built up a lot of custom tooling around App Center and are needing to figure out now what to do there. So if you're an App Center user, there's an additional wrinkle in this whole distribution thing. So leading into a quick demo here of Build Distro, what we've built, how we are approaching it sort of philosophically, what we're trying to solve for. The first is, again, that idea of logical groupings of builds, making sure it is clear and easy how to get the right builds into the right hands across this full end-to-end cycle. So you should be able to separate out feature builds, work in progress builds from ones that occur later, different phases of the release cycle. So how do you group builds and get them to the right people really easily and clearly? Second thing we wanted to aim for here is a very human-centric approach. So speaking to the sort of lack of context that we've seen and the trickiness with install flows, we wanted to flip that script, add context. So there's a lot of integrations that will add additional information on what a build contains. And we've done some work to make the install flow as easy as possible. Finally, integrations. Runway is integration heavy, as some of you may already know. We so far have decided to keep a very small footprint at the code base level. Build Distro doesn't require actually a plugin or any scripting. We rely on these sort of API-based integrations with the CI tool that you use. Benefits there is there's very little to do to get stood up, to get operating, and also avoiding the lock-in that can happen where you need to sort of do a lot of scripting and changes at the code base level just for a particular tool. So with that, I'm going to switch screens here. Give me a second. We're going to take a look at Build Distro. Just need to find the right window for you all. Perfect. And now I need to find the right window. There we go. Awesome. So quick demo here of Build Distro. Like I said at the beginning, any questions, drop them into chat. I will try to keep an eye there. And if I don't see it while we're going here, we'll answer questions at the end as well. First thing you'll notice here, perhaps, is these groupings of builds that we call buckets. So this is that logical grouping I was talking about, where different flavors of builds live in distinct areas. And these different flavors are automatically put there by Runway based on a few different factors. This is all pulling from CI. So that point I mentioned about no code-based presence, we have integrations, and I'll just show you what that looks like over here. A range of integrations, of course, for the broader Runway platform. CI integration, a lot of different supported providers here, sort of API-based. Depending on the provider, the auth is going to vary. Really easy to plug in and get started. So you basically point Runway to your CI, and then to start defining these buckets, you're going to point Runway to particular workflows in CI. You're also going to point us to particular branches or PRs. So on a bucket, there are these rules that you can define. There are a couple types: branch rule, pull request rule. A branch rule is going to look at builds on a particular branch, of course. You can have tokenized names. So if you want a release candidate bucket, which we have in the demo here, you can do a sort of tokenized versioned branch name, and it's going to pull from any release branch that it sees. You can do wildcards as well. This is useful for teams that have maybe a convention around feature branches for different teams. You could do team-based buckets looking at the naming of a branch. The PR rule will look at these two different bucket types as well. PR rule is going to look at open PRs against a branch. So very often used for, let's say, feature branches that might be open against your working branch, for example. There's some nice automations and stuff that actually happens around the pull request rule type as well that we'll look at. The other definition here that tells Runway where to look for a particular build is your CI workflow. So you'll be able to choose from all your different workflows that might be building different build flavors. You can add arguments here as well. So sometimes teams will have one workflow and different arguments that will create the different flavors. So different ways to set that up. You can see here, you put the branch in. There are some filters. So you have another way to break things down by, for example, team or contributor. If you integrate your GitHub or version control here on Runway, you have this filter where we can look at actually who contributed the code or the change that created the build, and then filter down that way. And so you can create, again, team-based buckets, or you can create individual buckets for each engineer, let's say. Different ways to filter that down. Finally, a file name filter. So of course, some teams will have workflows that produce multiple artifacts, different types. This is a way to filter down accordingly. And then you can see there's sort of the access controls. So Runway has a system of permissions and roles and groups, and we also support SSO SAML, so we can map from your Active Directory, sort of sync that. And you can apply these rules on the bucket level where different sets of folks have access to these different groupings of builds. So that's how the sort of organization works, high level, these buckets, different build flavors. There are sort of manual or personal buckets as well. So folks can actually upload builds if they want manually, and then share those with the team. Taking a look at one of these buckets here, at the build level, some things to call out. Tester notes, you can set tester notes here, and you can also automate the generation of tester notes build to build. So there's actually an automation, if we pull this up, to generate tester notes based on the diff that Runway sees for the build. So if you start integrating version control, or you can also integrate a ticket management or a project management tool like Jira, Runway actually looks at all these different places and can surface a full diff that looks at all the changes. We don't have one here. I'll try to find us an example later. But this is a great way to have that full context on your builds, where it's not just a build number. It's also not just a commit hash. You're going to actually see the changes in the build, both on the code side and the ticket side. So if you have PMs looking at stuff, or QA, less technical folks, anyone on the team for that matter, they should have a clear picture of what's in a build. And again, the automatic tester notes, if you want, can be added there. Other details on the build, of course, about the artifact and the build and that kind of thing. So take a quick look at other automations. The PR based buckets will have this option to automatically get install links posted or commented on PRs. So when you have a bucket with a PR rule, which this one has, it's any PRs against development, enable this automation. For every new build that comes from a particular PR, Runway will post an install link. And so hopefully I can switch tabs here and show you. It looks a little something like this. This is a PR that sort of was built, showed up in the bucket, and you can see this sort of install link appeared there. If changes are made and new builds are created, a new install link appears. So really nice way to get folks quick access out on the code side if engineers are testing stuff or QA maybe is looking at pending PRs. Trigger automation is a nice one. Runway can automatically kick off new builds based on a few different sort of strategies or options. Smart mode, trigger based on the bucket configuration. This is going to depend on the bucket type. So for example, for this bucket, PRs against your working branch, when we see a new PR open up against the working branch, we can trigger a build on that PR. So you'll have a build ready for you shortly after someone opens a new PR. There's also a time-based trigger. So this one is really useful for, let's say, branch-based builds like nightlies on a working branch. Many teams will create nightly builds or maybe twice daily. And so you can have Runway automatically kick off those builds for you. And again, this is through the CI integration. So we just talk to CI and tell them what to do, pass the appropriate, of course, workflow parameters, et cetera, based on the bucket configuration. Final automation here to highlight, if you want us to, we can further upload artifacts to other destinations. So if you connect a store like App Store Connect, Play Console, you can have us send artifacts onwards. So you might be doing this if you're interested for your RC bucket, for example. So we can take your RCs and upload them to App Store Connect or Test Flight Play Console as well on the Android side. And yeah, there's some options for the behavior if multiple builds are in flight. Cool. Take a quick look here for questions. Why are they called buckets? That's a great question. The team came up with it. You know, buckets are sort of holding different items in different places, I suppose. So that's where we landed on that. Happy to take feedback on the naming here. To quickly speak to the sort of installation process. So you have builds here, you have buckets, great. How do you get these builds? What happens next? Notifications, first of all, an important one. Aside from the PR sort of comment, Runway will notify, and you can direct this into Slack or Teams in different places when new builds are available. From there, in the notifications, there's actually a direct link to install. So you can install from there. There are install links here in Build Distro in the platform. QR code, this will take you straight to the right build on your phone. And then you just tap to install. You can also share a link with yourself on Slack. That will look a little something like this. So you can see a bit of info about the build and a link to install. We have a mobile optimized view here. So for folks that go to the install page or anyone that's looking around in buckets or looking for a build on mobile, it can look a little something like this. So you're going to see your buckets here. You can also actually just view by time, by latest build. If you pull up a build here and it's signed such that you can install it, that's an App Store build. But if we go to, let's see, the payment bucket we were looking at, you can see, you can see all the details about the build here. Of course, you'll see the diff there if we had that data, and you can install straight from here. You can see that message at the top also to register this device. If you need to register new devices or a new user, joins your team, they will be presented with this, and there's a nice flow using what's it called, web clips or something that will get folks up and running with new devices. And there's a whole area of Runway as well where you can manage devices and handle that part of the process. So that's what mobile looks like in Build Distro. And coming back here, we looked at a few different types of buckets. We looked at automations, bucket rules, I think, and we're almost at time here. So last thing to show you all, there's actually an integration into the broader platform here in Runway. Some of you may have seen this this mobile release management sort of side of the product before. Some of you might be users. If you want to start using Build Distro and have that more tightly integrated into the mobile release management side, you can see that it can be integrated up here. It's the step that right now we call beta testing in Runway. It's really for any pre-production distribution, and you can manage everything you need to around testers, manage the builds here, and update testing notes, that kind of thing, also automate it. So as part of the broader flow, you can integrate Build Distro here, much as you might integrate TestFlight or some other pre-production platform. So I'll hop back here. I'll keep us on this screen. We can take a closer look at any particular parts of Build Distro, but that is the quick high-level view. Happy to answer questions. I'm glad the buckets explanation was sufficient. Thank you, Alice. Let's see, SSO and provisioning. Yeah, so we do support SSO, a whole range of different providers there, so it should be fine. In addition to SSO, Active Directory sync, so you can actually use that to sync different user groups and roles between your org and Runway and Build Distro. So that should be pretty seamless. Provisioning, deprovisioning users, yeah, that's the Active Directory sync. And differences with App Center. Yeah, so it's a few things. I think going back to sort of the earlier part of the presentation where we're talking about how things are set up, I think one of the biggest ones is sort of the natural grouping of different build flavors. What we've heard from many App Center teams at scale is that to sort of get around things, they've hacked their own system to use App Center API to spin up new apps basically per grouping of builds. And so they end up with all these apps that need to be managed, and this very deep sort of integration on their side they need to maintain. That would be the big standout, is actually having a natural way to point to and automatically group these different flavors, different builds for different teams, and allow it to make a lot more sense for folks. Beyond that, the extra context here and the automations, I think there are a lot of gaps between App Center and what we've built. And of course, then the native sort of integration into the broader release cycle and how that shows up in the mobile release management side would call out. Integrations with current tooling, another good question. Yeah, so this is a big focus for us as a team in general, making our integrations super easy to stand up. Part of why it's all right now this sort of pull versus push model where you just need to integrate CI and we take care of the rest. So it depends on your, for example, your CI provider or for the other integrations, version control, project management, but it might be an OAuth flow, it might be just an API key. It varies depending on the tool, but that's basically all that's needed. You connect the integration, and then as you build out these groupings and buckets, you'll be pointing to different workflows and stuff, which will be surfaced automatically for you. So pretty easy to get going. Other questions here? We're almost right on time. Non-technical folks, yeah, this is again sort of one of the big aims that we've had from the beginning, is thinking about those non-technical folks, how to make this approachable and easier experience. So it's a combination of notifications that you might send to a particular group or a particular place when there are new builds, get that in front of the wider team. From there, the install flow should be really easy, even for non-technical folks. If you click through one of the install links, you'll land right on the build in that mobile experience. If your device is not yet registered, you'll be walked through that flow. Otherwise, you just install and you're good to go. So it's definitely been the aim to make it easy for technical and non-technical alike. The extra context on the builds I'd also call out. So instead of just a build number, where someone gets pushed into a build, they'll see context about the change, the author, the diff, and tester notes as well can be there. Cool. Last few seconds here for any more questions. Otherwise, I will thank you all for joining us. Hopefully this was interesting and helpful. If any more questions come to mind, definitely reach out to our team. We're always happy to chat. Good luck to those folks who are needing to figure out things after App Center. Definitely get in touch if you want a sort of sounding board for approaches going forward. And like I said before, recording is going to go out after this, so you'll receive that. Feel free to share with your team. Otherwise, we'll let you all go. Have a good rest of your days or evenings, depending where you are. And thanks so much for joining.